Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another webinar. So we're going to be talking about cracking the curiosity code. I just want to make sure, because we're having some challenge, Diane wasn't able to hear me. Can somebody give me a thumbs up or let me know if they can hear? Put something in the chat that you can hear me speaking. That would be good.
Put it in the chat.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yes, but is it just Diane or Ira post? If you could, both.
Yeah, okay, perfect.
Oh, both, great.
Okay, so we figured that one out. So our curiosity got figured out. Hitting enough buttons here, we figured out how to make this work. So again, appreciate everybody being here. Thanks for the heads up. Thanks for being part of our technical crew here. I want to quickly get to the topic. Obviously, we've had a lot of people here today. That's top of mind. So we're probably preaching to the choir here, Diane, to be able to do this. But I wanted to go through a couple announcements. So I'm just going to share my screen pretty quickly. And let me just see here. Make sure we go to the right screen. Okay. So again, my name's Ira Wolfe. Thanks for helping us get through the technical challenges here. Thanks for everybody being here. We got people from all over the country, which is great. My company is Success Performance Solutions. Many of you are familiar, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that. But we primarily provide pre-employment and leadership assessments to different companies. That's how Diane and I got hooked up together, because there's a curiosity code index, which we're going to be sure talking about. And we're going to be able to share that with everybody. It interests me. I've been assessing curiosity, people's curiosity for a while, for a long time, and more I was finding it was a critical part of the business, and so I was really excited when I saw the curiosity code. And so we'll be talking about that. But as far as the business is, we work with any type of assessment, all the way from typing, data entry. Can people use Word and Excel? I know some of you might be using those tests through us or other companies, but we do personality testing, competency testing for leadership, cognitive tests becoming a lot more popular, making sure people, especially in today's day and age, keeping up with the things. We've got a trust profile, we've got a curiosity profile. We're going to be talking today about a brand new profile, perception profile, which is super critical, especially talking about how to get our unconscious bias under control and being able to kind of take some of our assumptions that we make and how to have a higher self-awareness with that. So anybody's interested, please check out my website at successperformancesolutions.com. A couple other events that are coming up. Oh, one other thing. I put this in the chat. Most of these events run a free contest. All you have to do is go to type in text 64600, type in the words WinRag, which is win recruiting in the age of Googleization. So WinRag, you'll automatically be entered into a contest, and by before the end, somebody's going to get a text message that you won. And so if you want to get a copy of Recruiting in the Age of Googleization, and just a heads up, the first 130 pages have nothing to do with recruiting. It's about the future we're living in now. So I wrote it 3 years ago, and was pretty close to true. I thought it would be because of technology, but as it turned out, it's we had a pandemic that just accelerated the technology. So hopefully you'll enjoy reading that. We're here to talk about cracking the curiosity code, but before we get there, been doing webinars every Thursday, 2 o'clock. I know many of you have been on it. Next week we've got a really great topic. It's why quantifying equity matters. Lots of talk about diversity and inclusion. We're going to be talking about the velocity of opportunity. Does everybody have the same chance at the same pace? And many times there's leadership programs, there's training programs, there's career opportunity programs, there's even job opportunities. It's not only that you've given people of different races, ethnicity, gender, sexual preference, whatever it might be, that you've given everybody that chance, but you give them an equal chance. And Dr. Solange Shira will be my guest. And she has done a lot of analytics, a lot of data, a lot of study, and being able to go into your organization and identify the velocity of opportunity is going to be huge. It's going to make a big difference. And if we truly want to create equity within companies and in society, it's going to be an important message. So we'll be talking about that next week. And then the following week, we're wrapping up our Future of Future of Employability series. And we're going to be talking about how to rebuild the workforce knowledge, because a lot of people are going to be, we've been talking about the job skill shortage for years. A lot of people are going to be out of work. They're not prepared for the skills that are going to be needed. We need to do some rebuilding fast. And so we're going to be talking with Dr. Ed Gordon about that. But we're here to talk about today, cracking the curiosity code. Met Diane a year and a half ago, maybe, somewhere around there. We hit it off right away. She was a guest on the podcast, Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization. Again, the topic just resonates, and it's more so now. I just came back. I've had the opportunity to spend time with. Today we're babysitting my wife. He's upstairs, so I don't think you'll hear any crying. But my 1 year old grandson, and just watching him. I just spent an hour and a half with him, and that's what curiosity is. There is nothing that he touches. The food he eats. I put him up to the counter, and he just opens the closet door, back and forth, checking it out. He looks at the knob. He looks at the screw that's holding in the knob. It's just fascination. So if you want a lesson of what curiosity could be, just hang around somebody that's young, until as adults we all screw it up, and that's what that's what we're going to be talking about today, cracking that curiosity code. So I want to be able to jump into this right away. We'll be talking about the Power of Perception's new book. You can go up to Diane's website. I know she'll give you the directions to get there, cracking the curiosity code. And then at the end, we are giving away a code for the Curiosity Code Index. So everybody will be able to test their curiosity, see where they fall. And also, what was the other thing that we were going to do? Had the curiosity code. Oh, for anybody that's here that's interested in SHRM credits, there is one professional development credit, one PDC. At the end, you'll get the activity code. So hang in there till the end. So that'll be great. So let me take these down for now so we can get back to us. And so welcome, Diane. It's great to see you. We've talked, we've emailed, we've chatted. We did our podcast, which was just audio. It's great to see you again.
It is great to see you. Thank you for having me here, Ira. Yeah. I know it's a little different trying to hear through the earbuds, so if I make you repeat something.
We've all learned, I just was on a call earlier today, and we learned to be authentic and transparent, because we've all had these issues, and it's been a challenge. So no worries about that. We've had headsets on, we've had lack of no mics. We figured it out, and it's working. So let's talk about one of the things that has impressed me. I don't think there's a single conversation that I'm in now that we talk about emotional intelligence, we talk about empathy, we talk about leadership, we talk about change management, we talk about, again, you just go down this laundry list of things. Right. And every one of them, the driving factor, the important ingredient that no one seems to mention is curiosity. Because you can't have greater self-awareness, you can't understand other people, you can't have empathy, you can't walk in somebody else's shoes if you're not curious.
Yeah, you bring up a great topic because I talk to so many people about this. It's kind of like baking a cake is how I tell people when I describe how curiosity impacts things. If you're baking a cake, your end product is a cake, right? And you mix all these ingredients like oil and eggs and water, everything that you'd mix to have your cake. And you put it in the oven and you hope to have this output of cake. That's your product. But if you don't turn on the oven, you get goo. You don't get cake, right? So it's the same thing in the workplace. All the things that Ira mentioned are all the things that companies want. They want to develop empathy, which is a big part of emotional intelligence. They want to have critical thinking. They want to have all these soft skills. They want to have innovation, engagement, productivity, all the things that lead to money, right? But nobody's turning on the oven, and the oven, the spark, is curiosity. And I think that it's all very easy to say the word curiosity. I think we hear that term a lot, but we don't really think of what it means. And to me, what I was trying to get away from when I was studying this was status quo thinking, because status quo thinking is the end of a company. And I know a lot of you are consultants who are watching this, and you've probably given emotional intelligence tests and DISCs and all these assessments, which are great. But sometimes there's this big empty gap of what we're not helping companies improve in, and that's to get away from this status quo thinking. And that's what I tried to do when I created the Curiosity Code Index, because what I found was if you look out there in the world of what research there is in curiosity, they have assessments that'll tell you if you're curious or not. They'll give you a range, you're high or low. But what happens if you're low, right? You're just stuck. And that's what I wanted to change. I wanted to tell you, like, this is what's stopping you, and this is how to go forward.
So let's go back. You mentioned people don't always understand what curiosity is. So what's your definition? Let's start at the beginning. What is curiosity? Because I think it's beyond, again, I don't think, but I know it's beyond, but a lot of people make an assumption that it's just asking questions. Just asking a question doesn't mean you're curious.
No, I guess a lot of people think about it as the desire to explore and learn new things. And you could say that, but to me, it's going beyond the status quo way of things that we've always done things. It's asking why not. It's also providing solutions, being curious enough to say, hey, what would happen if we tried this? And it goes beyond just finding out how to get to the next level of Candy Crush or something like that. It's got to be very focused. It's got to be about finding ways that we just haven't thought before. And when I wrote my book, I listed some companies who did things that were kind of outside the box kind of thinking. I mean, there was a hospital in London where they were having a lot of people were dying as they were transferring them from the OR into the recovery area. And they thought, well, everything we've ever done to try and fix this just doesn't improve our results. So a couple of the executives one night were watching a Formula One race car event, and they saw these, the race car team take apart the Ferrari and put it back together in 7 seconds. And they thought, well, wow, look at how they could do that. Why can't we just move a patient from here to here without problems? So they had this team come in and look at what they were doing within the hospital, and they found, there was all kinds of things that these fresh eyes were able to give them as suggestions. And I think their curiosity as leaders, thinking outside of their cubicle, outside of their silo, outside of their industry, is what I'd like to instill.
Right. So I guess the one thing, and I mentioned this before, I mean, observing a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old. And again, I'm glad I'm getting a second chance because I raised kids and I probably made mistakes. That's what you do as grandparents. You have to fix all the mistakes you did and have fun this time around. But, one of the things that I certainly remember growing up, although I had good grades and I'm obviously was curious, is that at some point you're told, stop asking so many questions.
Yeah.
The whole education system was based on, listen to the teacher, listen, don't talk. It's not the right time to ask a question. And some people challenge that. I mean, so, I had even though I was a top student, there were some incidents I had because I asked questions. In fact, I just had a class reunion and went back and there was a teacher and he was teaching. He was a new teacher, fresh out of college, young guy. I mean, we were in the mid 60s. And he wrote I don't even remember the name of the book, but we thought it was controversial at the time. And so we started to question. Donna and I, who was a classmate, started the question, and we found ourselves sitting outside the class for the rest of the semester.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, we were taken to the principal's office for being unruly. It was the only D I ever got in school because we asked questions. And so, that just continues on. So there's two parts here. Is I know you have other examples of that, of where people's curiosity is just crushed, and maybe some other people have examples here. And if you do have an example of this, put it in the chat. Share these with you. We want to make this as interactive as possible. So if you've had an incident that you did or that happened to you, please share that. The other part of it is, though, just this morning, it's funny, just this morning, I had I got an email, and it was about a webinar about how to increase your curiosity, which I know is going back to what I said. We're all curious. We all have this curiosity, and that's basically your philosophy. It's not that you have to teach people to be creative.
No. Yeah, it comes naturally. Yeah. Well, you bring up so many good points, because we all start with this really high level, as you mentioned, with your grandchild being there. We all have this high level of curiosity. And then around the age of 5 or so, it starts to go up, and then it goes down dramatically. And there's some great TED Talks by Sir Ken Robinson and George Land, and famous researchers out there that looked at creativity. I've had Francesca Gino has been on my show from Harvard, and she's done some research. And we look at how all these things are impacted by not just going to school and having a teacher or professor like you had that just says, people are supposed to be seen, and kids are supposed to be seen and not heard, or whatever we've been told as children, right? But there's all these other factors that can tie in. And I think that was what was so interesting to me, just to see it's not just our environment. It's other things like what that environment maybe has our mind come up with in our voice that we tell ourselves, and I call that assumptions, things that we tell ourselves we shouldn't say or shouldn't do, and that could lead to fear. And when you have this voice telling you that if you say something that somebody's going to shut you down, or if you talk to this professor you're going to get kicked out of class, or you have a boss that says don't come to me with problems unless you have solutions. We've all heard these things that shut us down. I had a boss, I went to him, and he gave me something to do, and I said, hey, I'd love to do that. How do I do that? And he looked at me and he said, I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that. Oh, well, what does that tell you? You're an idiot. Don't ask questions. Pretend that you know things you don't know. And that happens every day at work. And you could have had this boss in the past, and your current boss doesn't even know you had that boss. And this just continues to get worse and worse as we don't address what's holding us back.
Right. So a couple comments here. Appreciate it. Solange, who's our speaker next week. As an educator, you had a really bad instructor. I love when my students ask questions.
Great.
I'm an old white guy. I'm going back many ages when this happened as a teenager, and so things have changed. I mean, things are definitely different. There's a much higher awareness, but the culture at the time was such that, as you said, Diane, children should be seen and not heard. And that was a philosophy. But this is another one, and for you to address about focused curiosity. Curiosity is great, but if it's unstructured, it can be unproductive. How do you find the right balance? I guess between going down a rabbit hole and
right. That's a good question. You really want to have very focused emphasis on what you're curious about. And in the business setting, we talk to leaders about this. I do a lot of work with Verizon, Novartis, and other large, I've talked to Merck, and you name the companies, and they all are embracing this culture of curiosity, but they don't want to get people getting down the Candy Crush hole, obviously. So what we're trying to do is look at different ways of getting people into getting used to reading and learning and going into areas that are maybe helpful to their work, but that aren't their norm of what they get into. Like, for example, Novartis has a program where they have 100 hours that they reward a year for any kind of education or training that they do that ties into maybe their job, but maybe isn't their initial things that they would normally learn, and it's outside of that focus. And they do these little mini TED Talks, like a TEDx, but meant for just the company itself. And they have their own employees as the speakers. They don't get outside people as professional speakers. And if you ever want to learn something, as Solange said, you want to be a good professor, you want to teach it, you really will learn something. So that's what their goal is behind that. At Verizon, they do a lot of little education videos to teach people about the value of learning things that are specific to what their industry is, to building curiosity. They've had me come in to help create some of those videos, and then they have employees get on and say, this is how I've used curiosity to help me be successful in my career. So when you get to see more directed curiosity towards different areas, and it really helps open up the possibilities of what they can learn. But to learn just to say I've checked off the box and I've read a book this week, it doesn't necessarily lead you to an end goal. So we try to have people create these SMART goals based on what they learn and their Curiosity Code Index results. And that's kind of like through doing a personal SWOT.
Yeah. So you brought, and I want to get to that, what you call the acronym of FATE, which I think I think it's a brilliant, because I think right now, and you've seen me promote you and just promote the Curiosity Index, talking about that the fate of humanity or the fate of our future is really tied to this, because it really unveils or it gets rid of all the trappings of curiosity, so that it gets exposed. But one thing you just said, I'm wondering, I mean, we're doing this obviously remotely, and the whole debate now with education. And I feel that some of that debate is that people are just uncomfortable with virtual learning, with the technology and the approach and the methodology of that. So I don't think we're ever going back to 100% classroom, maybe elementary, maybe some of the schools, but I think there's a greater acceptance. But is the curiosity, because we have this infrastructure that people went to class and supposedly absorbed this knowledge, and that process almost shut down the learning, the curiosity, and now that people are forced to figure these things out, and there's more conversation, like even today we got a chat going, there's more interaction going. I'm just wondering if it's actually, this isn't a better approach to cultivate curiosity.
I think it's forced people to learn things that they would have never otherwise learned. And I've taught more than 1,000 online courses. So I've seen how this has changed. And a lot of the courses I teach, we get into VARC, whether people are, visual or auditory or different types of learners. And I think that when you get into the online atmosphere, it was traditionally kind of challenging to reach people in the way they wanted to be, because they just had all reading on the screen. And then we had more videos and different ways of communicating. And I think in the education realm, as Sir Ken Robinson said in this TED Talk, was that, we're educating people out of their capabilities sometimes. And one of them is creativity, and we've got curiosity falls into that mix, because if you go to these classes in the past, sometimes it was all focused on maybe math and science. It was focused on, and maybe some of the soft skills that we're talking about, you mentioned empathy before, so, emotional intelligence, some of these things we didn't see a lot of focus on. So I think that we're in a time where we're looking at people are hired for their knowledge and fired for their behaviors, right? So we're going to see a lot more behavioral based things focused on in education, but they're now going to have to focus on delivery. How do we do this? Now, are we doing it through Zoom? Are we doing it through a virtual way? And it's making people question things. And I love that, because we have it to find the most optimal way to reach people.
So I want to just go back, and Paul, I don't know if this was just Paul's screen or my question froze for everybody. But basically, what I had asked Diane was about where the virtual learning or what will eventually probably become more hybrid learning, more online learning, will create more opportunities for people to be curious rather than people kind of falling into the trap of going to a classroom being, there was this hour discussion or 45 minutes of discussion and learning and a teacher up in front and students there, maybe a couple questions, but you can hide. Where does the online format create more opportunity, and will it force people? And you heard the answer before the question. So a little bit like here, right?
Well, it is a challenge with technology, we're finding it out here, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So before we get too far away from this, because the crux of what cracking the curiosity code is that the story is that we're all curious. We're curious. We still have that childhood curiosity, but you've identified 4 core reasons that it cripples people, it stifles it, it crushes it, it buries it, whatever word you want to use. And as I mentioned, you had the acronym of FATE. So if you can walk through FATE for us and then maybe give some examples of you going along, because I think that's the key. And then again, everybody's going to have an opportunity to take the CCI, the Curiosity Code Index, and it'll identify, are there things that are holding you back from your curiosity back?
Well, I'm glad, I appreciate that, that you're interested in all this work that we've done, because I think it was really fascinating to me when I started to write about curiosity. I looked out there to see what kind of assessments were measuring things, and there wasn't anything that told you what holds you back or inhibits you, is the word I use, your curiosity. And I apologize if I kind of stumble as I say this. I'm hearing myself in delayed time in my ear, but
you're doing really well with that. I wondered how that was.
Thank you. I'm hearing all kinds of things.
And just before you go there, I just want to look, because again, my business is in the assessment side, so that's what the attraction was initially. But even when I do a job fit, even when we do a personality assessment or a cognitive assessment, a lot of times I tell people, don't focus on the strengths. I know this goes against Gallup Strength Finder. Is the strengths are important because that's your innate skills. That's what you have. And in this case, we're talking about curiosity. What I always look at are what are the things that might hold you back? What are the vulnerable areas? Because you could be a great fit. Let's say you get a score of 90%. You're a 90% fit. I worry more about the 10%. I worry about what can get in the way, because so often that's the thing that trips people up. It's not that they don't have the ability. It's that they have something else that either holds them back or gets in the way. And that's where I think the FATE comes through so well.
Well, you bring up a good point, because there's always room for improvement in anything that we find out, that we measure, and I was trying to make this quantifiable of what kinds of things hold us back. And to look at that, I started out by putting a thread into a LinkedIn group, just asking them, what holds you back from being curious? And just before I got into my heavy research, I just wanted to see what the initial knee-jerk reaction was. And overwhelmingly, I heard a lot of people say fear. Fear holds them back. They don't want to look stupid. They don't want to look unprepared. They don't want to ask that question in meetings. They're the only ones that have that question. And hey, Ira, why don't you ask the questions? We want Ira to look stupid. We don't want to ask it. So I think that there's this sense of fear that can overwhelm people. But that wasn't the only factor I found. And what I did was I studied thousands of people for years by giving them different questions, trying to figure out what are the factors that hold people back. And the 4 factors, as Ira mentioned, I use the acronym of FATE, fear, assumptions, technology, and environment. And Ira asked me to go through those. So let me just start with fear. We talked about, it's that embarrassment. It's that sense of not being prepared, that you're the only one that has this question. And it's very intimidating to a lot of people, especially if you have that boss like I had, who would say something like, I'll pretend I didn't hear that. Or the guy or gal who says, don't come to me with problems unless you have solutions. when you have somebody cut you off at the knees like that, the next time you have a question, the next time you have a great idea, you're not going to provide it. So fear is a huge factor. There's different aspects to fear, and in the CCI, there's 36 questions. So you've got 9 questions of fear, 9 under assumptions, 9 under technology, and 9 under environment. So you get to find what parts of fear are problematic for you. So you might not have fear embarrassment, you might fear, being unprepared or whatever. So it's really important to look at the different aspects under each of these. As we go into assumptions, that's really the voice in your head. That's what you're telling yourself. And I often will be in a talk where I'll hold up a bottle of water and I'll say, how heavy is this water? And they'll guess, 6 ounces, whatever. And I'll say, well, it doesn't matter. It matters how long I hold it. If I hold it for a little while, no big deal. I hold it for an hour, my hand gets a little tired. I hold it for a long time, my arm is like paralyzed, right? So that's how our assumptions are. We tell ourselves these things. I'm not going to be interested in this. It was too hard to study that in the past. That professor kicked me out of class. Like Ira.
Very good with math, right?
Not very good with math. There's all those kinds of things that you tell yourself that can also just make you just freeze, right? So that's a really big factor. And then as you look at technology, which was an interesting one to me, it's kind of over and underutilization of it. You could be the greatest mathematician in the world and not know it because they just gave you a calculator and never taught you the math behind it. So sometimes we need to have no tech days, and other times we need high tech days where we can take advantage of the tech. That's a real interesting thing. If you look at somebody like Wozniak, who wrote a book, I think it's called I Was, about his childhood. His father taught him to technology and the reason why things worked. So he had that great foundation behind why to put this wire to this and how it needs electricity and all that. So I think, though, our technology can either be something that we use in a great way, or it can really inhibit us. And then environment is really everybody you've ever known. It's your friends, your boss, it's your past boss, your teachers, your parents, your siblings, even social media. It's everybody with whom you've interacted your whole life. And so that's really challenging as we look at these things. There's like this background noise that we don't even recognize has impacted what we'll do now. Think of the parents who said you have to go into the family business. Everybody's always done this, or your siblings make fun of you because you're interested in that, because that's not cool, or whatever it is. And now you're old enough, you go, hey, wait a minute, I always liked that. It was just that they told me it was not a cool thing to do. So I think it's really important to get this assessment for, like you said, Ira had said, I should say, you could have a 90% in one area, but it's that 10% that maybe you could really excel and push yourself to the next level. This is huge, though, to organizations, because they're finding a way to get people out of that comfortable status quo zone that they've just kind of not recognized that these are the things that are holding them back.
So Sarah has a great question here, and just kind of, I was wondering when this was going to come up. So thank you, Sarah. She did a presentation for us a couple weeks ago, Diane, and it was on diversity and inclusion, cultivating diversity and inclusion using the growth mindset. So having that more open mind, obviously that's part of the curiosity. Right. And, so I guess people who had a growth, who are curious but are fearful of making a mistake or living up to other people's expectations, then develop that fixed mindset. So again, the underlying part of that is curiosity. But she had a question. So I'm going to read this out. I'm wondering what trends data you've seen on those who attempt strategies to build curiosity compared to those who are able to move the needle on applying more moments of curiosity.
You know, it was really interesting. First of all, to address what Ira said, mindset, I used a lot of Carol Dweck's work, you know, to look at how much, you know, that's a lot of environmental factors that she looked at. If you're a kid and your parents tell you, hey, yeah, you worked so hard to do that, good job. And you're going to have this growth mindset. And if you have this, like, oh, you're a natural, you don't have to really try too hard, you're not going to have that growth mindset. So I think that that's really important. As far as the data, that's very challenging to see what we've seen. I've had Francesca Gino talk about that on my show of what she's seen at Harvard. And a lot of what they see in the business setting is that leaders think they encourage curiosity. I'm sorry, it's kind of mirroring to myself and it's hard to talk at the same time, sorry. But they think they're encouraging curiosity, but actually half of their employees say, no, they're not. And so the companies like Verizon, for example, are making that as their culture, and Novartis make that into their core culture. But the studies aren't really what we'd hope to, you know, aren't really out there. So I'm working on one with Novartis right now where we're giving them, Cashton has an instrument that just tells you how curious you are. So it'll give you a scale if you're high or low. And we're going to give Cashton's instrument first, then they'll take the CCI to go through that process to develop their curiosity and to overcome the factors that inhibit it. And then we'll give Cashton's again to see the difference. And that's going to be some great research. But probably the best research that you can find right now is if you read Francesca's HBR article, The Case for Curiosity.
I just put that. That's our minds are working in the same rate. I just put
that in there. Great.
Article in the chat for everybody. So.
Yeah, Francesca, and she's also been on my show, and I'm a little worried that I'm starting to lose sound in my ear, but I got a bump noise. But what we're finding, though, is that there's a lot of research in process. My research I published was how I came up with the 4 factors, and that's out there, and you could find that on the internet if you look up the 4 factors of the curiosity.
Or buy the book.
Yeah, it's also in my book. And also I have a free course on my website, developcuriosity.com. We'll get you right to that, where you can get some of those chapters and read much more about curiosity and some of the research that I've done.
So good. Another question from Solange. What's the relationship between mindfulness, sense making, and curiosity?
You know, that's an interesting one. I had Daniel Goleman on the show, and, you know, because I'd written my doctoral dissertation on emotional intelligence, so I was dying to have him on the show. But he's now very much a mindfulness expert. It's a direction. And I've had the mother of mindfulness, Ellen, on my show. I'm trying to think of her last name off the top of my head. But, you know, I have not done research to combine those things. It was, okay, you had mindfulness, curiosity. What was the other one?
Sense making. Sense
making. You know, that might be something we need to hire Ira to research, because I don't think that one's been done.
Developing, I actually was hired to develop a graduate program in leadership for change management. And one of my favorite books, one of the things that I remember when I had my master's in leadership, and one of the favorite books I had was called, the exact name, it was about the prepared mind. And what I liked about it, it asked, in fact, right here, it's right in front of me.
How convenient.
I basically took questions and it walked through making sense. It was a 4-step process. It was make sense, decide, and act. And it broke it down, a decision, into this process of what were the questions you needed to ask to make sense of the situation, or the sense that there was something going on, and then to make sense, and then to decide which path to take, and then what were the questions you needed to act on it. So again, there's, right. I'm happy to explore it, because I went back 15 years and said, I want to use that book in this class, because it taught me to ask really different questions to make sense of things.
I think it's really important. It ties into critical thinking in general, which we incorporate into as a MBA program chair at Forbes. We did a lot of critical thinking integration into the courses, right? And to do real great critical thinking, you have to think of the questions. You have to develop this sense of curiosity. And it ties into empathy because if you're going to find out about other people, you have to ask questions. And there's so much that I looked at in my book on perception and my research for the Perception Power Index, which is the next one I created, was because I looked at perception as a combination of curiosity, culture, IQ, and EQ. If you like the two CQs, the IQ and the EQ, it's a bunch of Qs here. And if you get those all together, you look at the perception process. So curiosity ties into so many different aspects. And I don't know if people have done enough research. I'd like to see more.
Well, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. And again, I was being completely candid and out there. I don't think because you get mentioned in almost every interview I do, either whether I'm doing the interviewing or I'm being interviewed. And the reason is that we hear about all these skills that are going to be needed for 2030. I mean, from everywhere from the World Health or the World Economic Forum to education. Everybody talks about critical thinking. People talk about emotional intelligence. People talk about empathy. People, now the buzz is adaptability or agile.
Right.
In order to do any of those, you have to be curious.
Right.
It's like people were trying to teach. I remember years ago, there was a class, an online class. It was by slides. It wasn't even interactive on how to, how to teach at the end of an hour of going through this and passing a test. It would demonstrate that you had empathy.
Well, yeah.
And
well, times have changed.
Right. But how can you have empathy? How can you have, even emotional intelligence? People, I bet you there's not a day that goes by that I don't get a request through my website for emotional intelligence test.
Yeah,
and
it's huge.
At the root of it is I always get on the conversation and ask, what do people want? And it's like, well, we need to be people more aware and self-awareness. Well, if they don't have curiosity, if they're not curious about what makes them tick, if they're not curious about what makes other people tick, if they're not curious about why people perceive them, and we'll get into your perception, perceive them in a certain way, then it doesn't really matter. I mean, you can have a class, you can have a course, you can get certified, you can get a degree in it. But if you don't have the base of curiosity, all you have is the knowledge. It's not going to change anything.
And there's so many people who went to school, which they just wanted to get that plain base of knowledge. They memorized and they were able to get through and get these great grades, but they're not necessarily the most successful people later. And I know you were talking about how we don't focus enough on the word curiosity, but we see Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and all these people talk about that's their number one quality. And so I think that's why we saw a lot of books on it, but not really how to fix it if you've lost it. And that's what I think is really the most critical aspect of this. And that's why when companies hire me or other consultants to come talk about this is so exciting to people in the training classes. They get really into this because it's so different. They've all taken assessments. They love the assessments. I mean, everybody loves taking DISC. You get in the corners, I'm a D or not, all that stuff. Everybody loves that. It's wonderful. This is a little bit different because they get to just focus in on not who am I, what type I am, but hey, if I develop this little action plan here, I can help me, and then I can help the company as a whole with their overall goals, which leaders love because they get this report back of all their issues of how the company can overcome some of these issues right from the horse's mouth, kind of like Disney did when they went to their laundry workers the turnover was incredible there. And they thought, if I could ask them what would make your job better, maybe we could help a little bit. And they did. They improved turnover dramatically because they found out if they put an air vent over their station or if they made their table go up and down, their back didn't hurt. They found real things that could make the job better. And that's what I was trying to do with the training that these consultants are doing with the companies, is to give them meaningful ways to improve engagement, innovation, or whatever it is that their top issues are within the company. So that's really great. And when consultants go through this process, just like you do with this, you get 5 hours of certification, SHRM recertification credit, I should say. And there's different motivating factors for consultants who are interested in going through the certification. But it's something that it's really unique when you're talking to leaders about this. They just haven't dealt with this before. And that's what I think makes it so appealing, because I've never talked to a CEO or a chief learning officer or anybody in a company where they don't go, that's really different.
Yeah. So again, another question here, and I appreciate the questions coming in. Can you use secondary information to understand a person's curiosity aptitude? For example, I don't want to go down a political route here, but can you compare Obama and Trump through the lens and understand outcomes?
That's right.
I think, reading headlines and fake news, and again, some of the fake news may be true. Some of the real news turns out to be false. But that comes from curiosity. It's not necessarily trusting that. And if there's anything, I mean, I again, with all the information that's coming out there, whether it's about the pandemic or economics or whatever, different viewpoints, you can't be critical of everything, but you have to ask questions about almost everything these days.
And you have to look at more than one source. If you only watch Fox or you only watch CNN, you're going to get one slanted view, right? So I think a lot of people like to reinforce their own view. And to do that is going to be limiting, because you're not really thinking critically. You're only thinking what supplies what you want to hear. So you have to try and listen to different sources and go to actual, peer-reviewed stuff to look up certain things. I mean, you can't just rely on edutainment, because that's not necessarily news.
So that's a great segue into perception. Because one of the things with curiosity is, and again, you can see where there's a stepping stone, is one of the things with curiosity is that if you are only watching Fox versus MSNBC, if you're only, if you're not watching any news at all versus something else, is that there's a confirmation bias. I mean, we right. We all have these biases, and, to determine which is right. But perception has really got exposed over the last few months, especially with George Floyd and some of the other killings, and that increased awareness. I mean, I grew up in the 60s, so, I remember some of these days. And I thought for a long time it was somewhat embarrassing of how much prejudice and bias and the way we treated people, and then sort of, hey, we're improving, we're getting better, and then it certainly, as I like to say, the shift hit the plan. Everybody's plan, this year for many reasons, but there's so much emphasis now on understanding conscious bias or unconscious bias. And that when I saw, I know you've been working on this a while, but when I saw that the assessment came out about perception, very, very interesting. It's basically exposing what, I think I'm pretty liberal and open and considerate. And then, I took the assessment and it's like, whoops. There's certain things that I'm even blinded to that are unintentional. But we all make these assumptions, perceptions. So talk about that a little bit. We have a few minutes here to go, but I think that's so important in what's going on today.
It was interesting to me because it's in that behavioral realm that I like to focus on. And I started to recognize that there's a process that we go through in this perception. And my co-author, Dr. Maya Zelahich, had worked in Forbes with me, and we had talked about what are these things that global businesses have to deal with. And a lot of it was, like I said, IQ, EQ, CQ, and CQ of the cultural quotient, curiosity quotient. And we started to look at this as a process. And I did the same kind of research as I did with curiosity to see what kinds of things impact it. And I looked at it as an EPIC process, and which, again, my acronyms. And it was all about how we evaluate, predict, and interpret and correlate information, and it's kind of a combination. It's not like IQ is 1 and EQ is P, whatever, and that they correlate. They all cross over. So sometimes you have to ask questions, which is your curiosity part, but there's also understanding the cultural aspect, and there's also just that whole critical thinking, and we're back to that ties into IQ and all that. So it's a process of what you go through to come up with your conclusions, and you don't recognize how much your vantage point impacts your decision, because as I say, your perception is reality. Well, so is Ira's is his reality, and and as we're talking, I may have no clue what his reality is unless I ask questions and try to develop empathy, and then we're back into EQ, right?
Right. So the model that you had, again, that we're all curious, that we all got this curiosity. It's not something you have to teach somebody. It's just you have to take off all the baggage that we've thrown on all over the years. Is the perception power, is that similar? Is that we're all good human beings, and we're not born innately with all biases, and then we throw on all these layers, and now we got to uncover that. Is it the same type of process?
It's what it is that you are part of what you are born around, and if you have this culture that says this is of value to us, and you don't recognize that this other culture doesn't value that at all and has this as a value, it's hard to know what you don't know. You know what I mean? And uncovering that these layers of the onion is what helps you really understand other people's decisions. You don't have to have the same opinion as they have. You don't have to say, oh, I agree with you, but you can understand where they came to this decision and why it's so important to them, so that you can find a common ground. And I think we want more win-win situations, but if everybody feels like they're losing something and they don't know why, that's causing a lot of negotiation issues. That's causing a lot of collaboration issues. And it's hard to work internationally if you open branches in other countries and you have to do business. You're very limited if you don't understand that.
Well, even within this country,
right?
Right. I mean, we got the blue and the red, right? And,
right. Very challenging.
Blue or red moving into one of those other areas. It's have to understand, how you're going to be perceived and what you can do about it, and go through those steps. That's great. A great quote again. Thank you, Sarah, for this. It's from Abraham Lincoln. I do not like that man. I must get to know him better.
That is a great one. I love that one.
Yeah.
The more you know, the more you can accept and you can embrace, because we're more alike than we are different. But it's unfortunate that we focus on those differences, and that can be the source of conflict. And we know how much companies are losing due to conflict, communication issues, engagement issues. And if we can work on these things, I mean, bottom line, if you're a consultant and you're talking to these companies about these things, they want to have the ROI. They want to know what's in it for their companies. And there's just so much into the research behind all of this to show that this ties in curiosity and perception and cultural quotients, and all that will help us be much more productive.
And again, going back to curiosity, that it's sort of the core. I mean, if you don't have that, I mean, how much money is spent on now, especially with what's the next step? How are companies going to emerge from this? Everybody's talking about transformation and disruption. If you're not curious, I mean, you just go through the steps. You go through the process. We're going to have a meeting. We're going to talk about it. If it's not curiosity of what's going on in the outside world, what's the future? Of what's living in an uncertain world going to be, nothing's going to change. So we go back to Einstein, keep doing the same thing over and over again, expect a different result. It's insanity. So that's also big there. So again, I think we're going to see. I was really excited about that, about curiosity, and then when I saw the perception, I think the two of those just work in hand. And really looking forward to that. There's before we got a couple minutes here. There's a couple things that I've got. I'm going to share my screen here a little bit and show you show everybody. I'll keep this up, Diane, while you're giving some other instructions there. So this is the code that you can go to for the Curiosity Index. If you, it's bit.ly/curiosity matters. If you do that, you go up to this includes a link with a coupon. So if you go to that, when you go to check out and get the Curiosity Code Index, it'll actually give you a code. The code's embedded there, so you can sign up for it and get it, and then it'll be automatic delivered to you. But to get to some of the to your book, Diane, to get to your course, how do people get in touch with you?
Well, you can find everything at drdianehamilton.com. You can go right to the curiosity stuff by going to curiositycode.com, but I think it's easiest just to go to my site at drdianehamilton.com, and the curiosity drop-down's at the top, the perception drop-down is at the top. You can scroll down to the bottom and sign up for that free course, which is really great because it's got a lot of video in it. It's got a lot of chapters from the book and a lot of content that could help you learn more about curiosity. And you can also find my radio show and everything else on my site. You can listen to my episode with Ira.
And yeah, go to Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization. You got yours as well. But
yeah. And follow me, please, at Dr. Diane Hamilton. I appreciate that too.
Yeah,
on all the social media.
Yeah, I put that in the. I have that in the chat. Also, an easier way rather than type the bit.ly, if you click on the little green button on the bottom, toward the bottom of your screen, that'll take you to that website, and you can scroll down about halfway, and that'll take you to the link, and you can get your profile, your Curiosity profile. So that'll be fun. Any closing comments that you have?
Well, I love that everybody's curious enough to join us today, because that shows that you have an open mind to trying to find things that can develop your sense of curiosity. I think that if you do nothing else after you take this assessment, try to take your worst score that you have for each of the 4 areas and create kind of just a measurable action plan of something you can do today that will help you overcome that. If you have a fear of speaking in a meeting, maybe think of a simple question next time to address to them that will make you feel too uncomfortable. And if it helps you to preface something by saying, I'm trying to develop my sense of curiosity so they don't shut you down, right? Say, I just hope you don't mind if I ask a question I normally wouldn't ask, but I would like to ask XYZ. And I think people are much more open to you if they think, hey, you're trying to develop this trait and there's a good reason for you asking that question.
Yeah, thank you very much. We will definitely be in touch. I know I'll be in touch with you. Hopefully, a lot of the people on today's event will be in touch with you as well. I anticipate knowing many of these people that they'll be taking the assessment, and that'll be up there for those who weren't able to make it. The link will be active. Everybody will be notified that you can take it for a few days. I think it expires Sunday. So anybody on the call, please make sure you get that taken care of. I don't know if anybody won the book, but you should have received the text, so you can email me. The text will give you that email. Let me know. I forgot to ask you before. When's the book coming out? When's the perception book?
Power of Perception. Yeah, that is scheduled for the last quarter of this year. We were waiting for COVID for obvious reasons. It's hard to get books with Amazon, and so we were going to just announce that later. But you can get to the Perception Power Index is available on drdianehamilton.com.
Yeah, I definitely recommend everybody do that as well. And you can see up here is the code, the activity code for the SHRM credit for everybody that participated today. Next week, as I said, we've got, let me go back here. Next week, we've got Dr. Solange, who was on today, Solange Shara, why quantifying equity matters. So we'll continue this conversation. And for everybody that's curious, you definitely want to be part of that. Talking about the velocity of equity within companies. It's another area that we need to work on. So one of the best things that's happening, I think, with the pandemic, if there is a silver lining, is that a lot of myths, a lot of assumptions were shattered, and there's a lot of good things happening out there. So appreciate everybody being part of this. Again, Diane, thank you very much. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you,
everyone.
You're in one of the hot spots. You're living in one of the hot spots.
Arizona. Yep.
Yep. Please stay safe. And thanks very much, everyone. We'll hopefully see you next week. Take care.